Hello, this is a sconce. You'll notice in front of me, I have some forum posts here. And basically what I was going to do, there have been two producers, two high-level people in wargaming that have been commenting on the North American forums of late in the effort to get the word out. I'm not going to go over everything that Evan has posted. These are too recent. But there were actually posts by Octavian, which is not an everyday occurrence, and I kind of wanted to get the word out, but I also wanted to preserve it. Because it's very easy for stuff to just kind of like disappear into the void when it comes to giant forum stuff. So, yeah, I'm just going to record all this. I know there's some people that have found updates or whatever on this interesting. Therefore, yeah, but as far as me, I don't think there's much to editorialize. I'm just going to read the stuff into the record, so to speak. This is talking about user all who made this. There were basically, this post was asking for a bunch of results as to when did you get to Missouri, so people could kind of plot it out and see if there's any behind the scenes waiting. Two people have said that there is not behind the scenes waiting, and I suppose maybe this will bear out when he does his examination of community feedback. I think that's just kind of a personal thing. So this was Chobitsu, who's responding to a larger post where somebody outlined a host of issues, to which Evan responds, "Indeed, Mason 1984's post was relatively clear. Most of what I told you in our private discussion applies to it as well, so I'll repost some of it. We're going to address some or all of the issues that are being mentioned in the community, but we need to do it at our own pace. This is not because we don't want to answer them quicker, but because there's science behind making a successful product, and that science will be applied before we make any commitments, especially ones regarding items that are complex or business critical. We will take the feedback about the problems being described and find solutions that both fit our goals and improve the sentiment of the community, but they might not be the same solutions as you are proposing. We will also keep things specific and won't discuss generalized concepts like "you are too greedy," because they're perceptions and they're not actionable within the scope of the discussion. Lastly, I appreciate the call out to keep things civilized. As I've also stated on stream, for us this is a business, and so the decisions we make are not personal nor emotional. While I do understand that for many of you it is emotional, attacking staff or the rest of the community will not achieve anything meaningful and does not contribute to solving anything. When we're ready to start addressing some of the mentioned pain points, we'll post about it on our official resources. We'll also reach out to members of our CC program and discuss some items with them. Since that is one of the major complaints, it stands to reason it would be part of the solution. As we've said countless times, some things are easy to do quickly, some things unfortunately take time. We're working on it. Best. I've said multiple times, it's, from all accounts of what I've seen, there's been a whole bunch of give a shit. There's been a lot of people that are concerned, and the sense that I get are there's a whole bunch of meetings with a whole bunch of people talking because it just, a lot of things exploded at once. And it's kind of like, if your plumbing broke at the same time that your wiring broke, at the same time that your car broke, well, then suddenly it might be time for you to sit down and have a real serious thought about, what are you doing with your house? How do you need to fix it? How do you need to move forward with your life? Because it just feels like everything exploded all at once. It's kind of that gig. But definitely, the time thing. Time thing is important. It is kind of interesting. We'll reach out to the members of our CC program and discuss some items with them, since that's one of the major complaints. It stands that it would be part of the solution. I've heard there were ex-CCs that are like, they haven't reached out to us, but at the same time, there were ex-CCs that all basically left a note saying, this is why I left, this is what I'm dissatisfied with. I mean, some of them made it publicly, some of them put it on the Discord, so I don't know, but I think Little White Mouse said Sale reached out to her after she expressed frustration with that, so at least that's something. But I assume they might be looking to either retool the program or clarify the program. And then once they do, I assume they'll have a sit down with CCs and say, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. But I don't know. All right, so that's that post. This is another one by Ev1n, who is a producer for North America. Don't forget to also tack crap onto the end of the name, because we, as the player base, are too dumb to figure out which ship is which. Belfast 43 Well, can't confuse that for Belfast. Vampire 2, can't confuse that for Vampire. Face it, Ouija is going to treat players like morons when it suits them, and if something takes a modicum of effort on their part, it is impossible. Tort bug fix when? Oh, next patch? But hey, at least on the current patch, they fixed a floating cat on a camo for a ship that not everyone has. Thanks, Satan, as that was just completely game-breaking. They fixed a floating cat on a camo. So, I'm sorry. So anyway, Ev1n responds. We don't think players are dumb. In fact, we believe it's reasonable for us to assume that players will generally be able to identify the ship by using its name and description. I'm glad they didn't say by picture because, Jesus, the little icons in like the corners, how the hell would you identify stuff off that without like having been in the line of work? Anyway, players will generally be able to identify the ship using its name and description. It's also worth pointing out that while you seem to generally dislike the idea of cloning ships, the player you are quoting is saying that doing that would have been better. That was a previous part in the discussion. With Missouri, we chose not to clone because we thought players would want the original Missouri rather than a clone. We saw similar comments with Belfast. Also, your example with Vampire 2 is curious considering that is an actual surviving vessel. Evidently, the Vampire 2 is a thing. Not sure how to address the fact if you're confusing it with its similarity to the other vampire. As for your characterization of effort, it's worth pointing out that the two examples you give have nothing to do with each other, save for QA and deployment process. Other than this, they require different people, have a different complexity, require a different amount of workload and different tools to be used, since it's not the same person working on them. They can be addressed at the same time. Since it's not the same person working on them, they can be addressed at the same time, and one of them is easier than the other, so it will be fixed faster. I believe this is normal. The torpedo bug involved game logic, so while the solution was found within a week, it had to go through all the regular quality assurance processes because just deploying the fix to production, product means live, could have made things even worse. So if they just kind of like fixed it on the live server and it broke other stuff, then they start chasing other bugs and then that breaks other stuff, and then so they have a quality assurance process or whatever that can take seemingly 2 or 3 patches or multiple months. So yeah, the torpedo bug sucked, but it was delayed because they wanted to see if the code broke anything. And now the kind of the meat of it, Octavian does not often post, at least not on the North American forum, or at least hasn't in a long time. So I figured I'd go ahead and read these because it does actually give quite a bit of information, and that could be useful. So Landed Killer said, Mademoiselle, can you please clear up who decided to put Missouri into loot boxes, Octavian or someone else? Can we get actual answers, or are we going to keep getting retired CCs under NDA to talk about this subject matter? Can't y'all release them on a specific subject to talk freely about who decided what? I don't know if retired CCs would know that, because I don't think that would ever be communicated to a CC. But anyway. Hello, I can clear it up for you, says Octavian. We do not have a single person who decides everything in the game. We have instead different roles and areas of responsibility, so there is always one person who makes a final call, but we always have a process where we sit down and discuss the decisions before they are made. There is also a role, Game Director, who is accountable for the whole game, and sometimes when other folks can't agree on something, it's his duty to decide what to do and carry the ultimate responsibility for it. Regarding monetization events, they are designed by the monetization team based on our roadmap and financial goals. Far in advance, a couple of months typically, their drafts are reviewed and discussed, including by me and my guys, Shania and Vessery. These are the 2 dudes that are on the CC Discord, so I guess we're under his area of responsibility, I don't know. And regional offices too. So answering your question directly, I did not decide to put Missouri in random bundles, but as executive producer, here I carry responsibility for approving this design and not raising any significant concerns. It is one of my duties to provide the information and context for my colleagues to make calls in advance, and in this particular case, I clearly failed, and it created the need to change the plans on the go. That said, when something like this happens, it's also one of my responsibilities to make sure we sit down, now in emergency mode, and decide what to do and how to address the situation. I would say that statement is rather telling. You know, I said earlier, I do personally believe there are a lot of people that are behind the scenes, you know, smashing heads together, trying to figure some stuff out. And I don't think they're going slowly. I think there's a lot of stuff going on that they've decided to really push onto, and that's not to say that it isn't going to take a lot of time. But if your plumbing breaks, if your electricity goes out, if something else breaks at the same time, you have a whole bunch of stuff to handle, and all of it needs to be handled now, but none of it's going to get handled quickly because all of it has to be scheduled, paid for, fixed, etc. But yeah, to me, this was actually telling. From Paladin, 1954. Sub's been noticeably absent the past week. Victor's either muzzled him or he's hiding under a desk in St. Petersburg. By the way, Conway's lying low too. I actually responded to this like, hey, did you know that Conway was on with Chrysantos? They did a Q&A for like an hour and a half. But anyway, response from Sub Octavian. I'm currently working with my colleagues on several things to address the current situation on many levels, from our communications and CC program, again, they're going to be altering this, I guess, to the game content and future plans. I'm not hiding, just trying to make an impact where I should. We're a team and have many layers of work. The fact I'm not here, but Ev1n is, does not mean I care less than him about the situation. We just work on the situation from different angles, respectively. Question, Midship Hornblower said, Mademoiselle, I may be a bit late with this, but it would really be helpful to me if, preferably at the beginning, you could throw up a company organization chart and tell us a bit about the organization of the company. I'm sure there are people who know all that already, but I'm not one of them. This would be interesting anyway, but I'm looking here for two specific things. One, how does the NA organization relate to other parts of the company, especially St. Petersburg and Cyprus? What decisions are made where? And two, how do you guys fit in? I've seen your titles, and based on those, I honestly don't have a concept of what either of you actually does. I guess I'm trying to figure out how much you can actually speak for the company. You know, do you have to clear every statement you make with the legal department or someone several levels senior in management? Or can you just make commitments and then actually make them happen? Now that I think about it, this almost sounds like a topic for one of your How Things Works videos. How Things Work, Wargaming Management Structure. Which, man, that would be fucking badass. I'm gonna put that out there, it'd be cool. I can address it, says Sub Octavian. 1. Regional teams' primary responsibility is what's happening in their respective regions. Activities, direct community interactions, which constitute answer streams, etc. Their quality of customer service, driving regional activities, collecting feedback, etc. When a decision is too important to just be local, regional teams sync with others between each other and devs. So all the regional teams collect their heads together along with the developers of the game. So, i.e., for an example, if for some reason there is need to offer a big bonus to players in one region, such as a week of free premium account, we always try to match it globally to make sure there's no regional disparity. Regarding decisions on the game itself, they're made with inputs from everyone, both on planning stage, for example, when we compile our ship roadmap for next year's regions. For next year's, regions would bring their opinion and ship requests. So, if I'm reading this correctly, the North American region might really want, for instance, the West Virginia, which is talked about later in this. Whereas Europeans may want a different ship that's European, or Asian region may want a different ship that's, Australian or Asian or of some sort. So if they're making a ship roadmap, stuff that they're going to release, everybody gets to put, their little pot in, trying to levy for their ship of choice or something. I'm going to start this one over. Regarding decisions for the game itself, they're made with inputs from everyone, both on planning stage. For example, when we compile our ship roadmap for next year's, the regions would bring their opinion and ship requests, and on daily basis, when we have a plan for the next update. Still, there are areas of responsibility. A balanced game designer makes a call on ship balancing, and an EU community manager makes a call on how to handle an EU stream. If there's some disagreement or even a red light, example, somebody believes that the job has to be done differently, there's a process where we can sit down and facilitate the conversation. We don't talk about our internal structure too much because we mostly don't believe it makes any difference to the players. What we do, how we do, is what matters more than what people were involved in this or that decision directly. I know it very well from my past experience as a community manager. You don't talk for yourself, you talk for the whole team and represent it. It's part of the job. 2. The level of commitment depends on what's involved. A community manager can't promise you to buff a ship before talking to colleagues in a balance team, for example. But the community manager certainly can promise to look into it and ask said team to do so and come back with a reply. Like buff Sal, for instance. One of the interesting myths about wargaming management structure is the concept of a marketing department. I heard players put a lot of blame for any controversial decision on the guys, even though in reality they literally work on pretty innocent things like game trailers, ad campaigns, and some business development activities. They have nothing to do with most of the in-game decisions. Another post. Land Collector says, Wargaming wants to hype up loot boxes because it brings them obscene amounts of money. WoW's subred is curtailing discussion on them because of their exploitive nature towards sections of the population. That's pretty different in my opinion. Octavian responds, random mechanics like loot boxes or random bundles constitute only a part of monetization of the game. Not insignificant, but also not in any way determinative. World of Warships monetization is still largely based on direct ship sales and premium account sales. Everything else is complementary. This was interesting. Not surprising in a way, but interesting. Going back to the response. If you look at our random-based stuff objectively, you will notice that in the majority of cases, it does not contain anything that can't be obtained otherwise or that is gameplay critical. I.e., early access random bundles allow you to play a ship a couple of months in advance. And that's it. Overwhelming majority of content is not locked this way. That said, in no way I claim we're doing everything correct. On the contrary, the Missouri case clearly shows we could have been more considerate, and of course, we follow all industry regulations, and looking at how it goes and how the world changes, it does not make sense to rely on such mechanics too much. So I'm going to stop here just really quickly. So, if you look at our random-based stuff objectively, you'll notice that in the majority of cases it does not contain anything that can't be obtained otherwise, or that is gameplay critical. And I was kind of wondering what gameplay critical means. And I think what that means, this is supposition here, there was recently a collaboration in the game, which has like Galaxy Heroes or something. So, well, I guess I can't do that then. But Galaxy Heroes, like skins and commanders and voiceovers and stuff. Well, in terms of gameplay critical, you may need, in a competitive situation, access to a certain ship to be gameplay relevant, because that ship is very impactful in the current gameplay or meta or whatever. Well, the skin is not gameplay relevant. A commander speaking in a different voice is not gameplay relevant. So I assume this means, in that sense, gameplay relevant is in ship access to a ship. So I have to point out, there was a ship, I think it's like a tier 5 secondary ship that I can't think of the name right now, Oklahoma or something, that the only way to obtain it was through loot box mechanics. You could buy 300, you could buy 500, you may never get the ship because it's completely down to random chance. You don't control that situation. So that is a problem. That is a problem that hopefully does not happen again. And if the Missouri is also clearly shows that we should be more considerate. If the Missouri is also locked behind a random bundle, loot box, whatever, theoretically, there could be a situation in which case the Missouri is extremely important in some kind of gameplay meta, and if it was locked in such a way that they don't have access to it through other means, like direct purchase, for instance, then whatever. You know, it's not to say that there aren't premiums in the game that aren't very impactful, like the Huang He in the current clan battle season, but those can be purchased for cash. You don't have to go through some random bundle, whatever. So when it says can't be obtained otherwise, is in through a grind or through an event or through in-game or just direct purchase or whatever. All right, so anyway, I'm going to move on from this one. But I did think that this was actually very, very useful. That group of information was very useful. Dead Eye Donut says, from what tidbits of data they've disclosed, it's been largely shown they don't collect the correct data anyway. It was raised once and the situation ended up a little like that live stream. I think they felt disrespected that a mere community member dared to tell them what data the spreadsheet should collect. How dare they? Those pesky mere humans, what do they know? The last one was how they justified the changes to unique upgrades. What was the criteria? How many people had them equipped? Period. That's where it ended. No more data. Joe Blogs, who had the Shima unique upgrade mission and hasn't logged on for 2 years, yep, he was included. To which the Octavian responds, that's not true, and I'm not sure why you got such impression. We do not look at popularity only when making calls on balance, and we do not take inactive audience into account too. It makes no sense. I think I want to talk about this one a little. If you have a quote or source on that, please kindly provide it so I can look into it. What you say now looks like a simple misinformation. We do not look at popularity only when making calls on balance. What does that mean? It means that they don't look at popularity only when doing balance. They're going to look at other things: damage amounts, kill amounts, influence amounts, cap amounts, pressure amounts. So they're not going to look at it and go like, oh, it's not being played enough, we have to buff it. They don't do it with CVs, they don't do it with surface ships, they don't do that. It's one part of a greater whole in terms of how you understand the situation. So yes, it matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. And this I thought was interesting. We do not take inactive audience into account too. And at first I read that, and I'm going to be honest, I kind of read it was like, well, that's kind of harsh. But at the same time, there was a point made by Little White Mouse, if I remember correctly, that 80% of the people playing this game weren't here a year and a half ago. Churn, by its nature, is going to churn out 50, 60, 70, 80% of the populace on a regular interval. So the amount of inactive accounts they have is probably staggering. So I don't think it's feasible for them to try to do this as an active account, like active thing to balance on. So I guess they would probably have to balance on active players, which would make sense because they'd have hundreds of thousands of active players, but millions of inactive players after years. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to call that out. Jacob Knight says, in the world of wargambling's banhammer strikes again. Translation: we don't want to hear about loot boxes or any conversation about the issue anymore on this subreddit, and will automatically lock and remove any mention of it from this moment forwards. Octavian responds, Reddit mods act independently, and they decide what to do with their sub on their own. They decided to ban all loot box related posts because of all the hate towards them, probably, and because of their personal position. It's their right to do so, and wargaming has nothing to do with it. I know there's a CC that is either a leader for the Reddit mods, or is like affiliated with them, but he's a CC. They don't tell CCs what to do. You can't lie. You can't lie to do like clickbait, and you can't act in bad faith, with information or whatever. Obviously you respect NDA, but that's it. So if Reddit wanted to do what the fuck Reddit wanted to do, then Reddit's gonna do what the fuck Reddit's gonna do. So, yeah. And he continues on the next page. Dr. Venture said, Wargaming will never release West Virginia 44. If they were going to, they would have done it by now. To which Octavian responds, we will release West Virginia 44 in 2023. I personally apologize for taking so long. I understand we should have closed this case much earlier. We specifically did not give any date when talking about her before, as we were not sure when and how. We were not sure about when and how, and it actually worked against us, unfortunately. This project was backlogged several times. It's not the case anymore. We've added the ship to the roadmap officially. It actually happened a bit earlier, but in the stream of all stuff that's happening, I think we did not actually mention it. P.S. There are chances for late 2022. Also, 2023 is a hard deadline, not later. So, just to kind of illuminate on this a little bit, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Dr. Venture, it might have been somebody else that was like, it's been 3.5 years or something. What the fuck is going on with this? You know, he made the post, Little White Mouse picked it up, she brought it into the Discord, she asked in the Discord, and the response was like, I don't remember the exact response, but it was equivalent to, let me check on that. Was effectively what it was. So there's two reasons you might get that. One, it got forgotten, or two, it's in development hell, where it stopped moving and people didn't know what to make of it, so it kept getting pushed off. My assumption off of this, they never started it. The other reason I would say that they didn't start it was because this was the same roadmap timeline that they gave Little White Mouse, talking about the ship that she wanted to have done, and that would include researching a ship, building the ship model, then instituting gameplay options, yada yada. It takes X amount of time, and to put their ship on a roadmap, they were told 2023. It was eventually moved to 2022, which I think is what not the Yukon, whatever the hell the next thing is. The Huron, I think it is? The Huron. I think that's scheduled in 2022 now, and evidently the West Virginia is scheduled in 2023, but if they can make it faster, great. So that's a little over a year at the minimum, because they're going to have to build it, because I guess they just didn't start it. But I do want to point out, we specifically did not give any date when talking about her before, as we weren't sure about how and when. This is very common in the industry, because people in game dev learned that if they tell you, oh, that'll be out in a year, there will be someone that remembers. There will be many people that remembers, and they will come with screenshots, and they will show you, you said this shit will be out in a year. And by all accounts, Wargaming never gave any actual date. They just said soon, you know, like soon TM. So soon should probably mean less than 3 years, but soon is not a release date. And yeah, so I guess they just kind of leaned on that soon way too much, and they got called on the soon, and now they're going to do it. Okay, next question. Bobby Boucher. Exactly. If this wasn't the case, we'd be hearing from Sub Octavian, but all has been quiet there, because honestly, they don't care. I wouldn't be shocked if managers are told to act like they don't care. What? Carrying here doesn't make the money the way they want to, and is a waste of their time. As long as they can sell loot boxes to children and launder money, their business model is succeeding and working as intended. Inflammatory? Sub Octavian responds. Our business model, and in general, our game has zero relation to children. For example, on North America, since 2018, the share of players under 16 was never higher than 4%. Paying audience percent is obviously much lower. Just a note on that, I think like paying audience is something like 5 to 15%. So that would be a single digit, or maybe not single digit, double digits? 10 people under 16? Anyway, moving on. Paying audience percent is obviously much lower. It's as low that I actually had a hard time finding any data. Our research team simply does not include this group into paying audience reports, as the numbers there are on the level of statistical fluctuation. That means like it's so small that the number could be there or it could be non-existent. The statistic can't actually give you a correct number. I understand that there are many things we should do better or more considerate with the game and community. And the initial idea of locking Missouri behind random bundles was one of such things. There is no arguing we should implement changes to earn back some good faith. This does not, however, mean we're also guilty of all mortal sins and profiting by selling loot boxes to children. With all due respect, if you're concerned about children and loot boxes in video games, World of Warships, a game with one of the highest audience ages in the market, is definitely not the game where it's a problem, especially if you look at the industry and other titles objectively. With all that in mind, it doesn't mean we're going to keep things as they are, because working as intended. I've seen a lot of comments about our age ratings and mostly about Peggy 7. I'd like to share some info about this too. We always act according to the law and industry regulations. Ratings We always act according to the law and industry regulations. Ratings, including PEGI, are given after the respective organization reviews the game. Recently, we've added a new disclaimer to our PEGI rating, in-game purchases, including random items. We're in the process of proactively adding such disclaimer to ESRB rating. It cannot be done just by us. We need a review, and that takes some time, so we've started working on it. Also, as I said, minors are not, and never were, our target audience, so to make it even clearer in the near future, we ourselves will apply for reevaluation to PEGI, and I think we will become PEGI 12. We don't market our game to children, and we don't need PEGI 7 in any way. It's just the rating we received back in the day. Is that all? Probably not. We'll see if there are other ways we can address minors in our game, even though there are practically none, meaning practically no minors in the game. Okay. Another question from Bandy73. Hi. Well, they are doing what they being told to do. But just replace marketing department with sales decisions and you'll have a much clearer and accurate picture. Octavian responds, in every job there is I need to do X factor, right? I think it's perfectly relatable. What I mean is, there's no department which controls everything that happens in the game for the sole purpose of doing something, even if it's something as important, as we need to pay our bills, as earning money. While, a rough example, 10 people are directly working on fulfilling our financial goals by planning sales, 490 people are directly working on everything else, like new gameplay experience, bug fixing, visuals, sound, tech, other ways to improve the game in different ways, and most of it is not connected to sales. Bandy continues, I think that's what you meant. Octavian responds, thank you, good catch. I don't quite know what that was in reference to, but okay. Bandy continues, we know for fact popularity plays a big part in wargaming decisions regarding balance decisions. There were a bunch of dots there. Octavian responds, it does, of course. We look at popularity often, i.e., when we balance commander skills. Popularity is a huge factor to see what skills should be changed and how. It does not mean we use it as a silver bullet to solve every question. In this case, it's actually, if there are skills that are just used by everybody, then effectively they're mandatory skills. So should you have mandatory skills in the game? That's a question. So concealment expert on destroyers, almost every DD takes it. But is that a problem? Because otherwise you're just giving people more points to work with. So maybe you have a core 10, but then you have 20 or 11 points of flexibility. That's a game decision. But I also think what this means is if there's a specific skill that is underused, like nobody touches that skill, it's trash. Well, that could be that the skill actually has value, but it's a perception issue, or maybe it just doesn't matter, in which case they can put a different skill there that does matter. So popularity does matter in terms of that. Bandy continues. Bandy74 continues. Otherwise, not so much because nobody asked for subs, but many people ask for the return of old operations/scenarios, new ones, and the majority of players ask for new maps, new battle modes, new events. I didn't mean like loot box selling events. Octavian continues. Wait, no, let me stop you right there. A lot of people asked for subs. I mean, when I joined the team like 7 years ago or something, my first drill was how to answer the question about subs. Of course, it does not mean it's the only thing we need to do. And we learned a lot from the CV rework. Sub process is much slower, more incremental and careful. We did a lot of tests and changes and still working on it. But your other points are perfectly valid. Let me briefly comment on them. First comment, soon, planned in 0.10.8, there will be a new convoy game mode inspired by historical events, and it's not the only game mode we're working on right now. Next, there will be at least one new map next year, and maybe one more. While the setting for the first one is decided on and it's important for its gameplay, wink wink, I don't know what that's a reference to, we will most likely involve the community into choosing the setting for the second one. More news will follow later. I know a lot of people will be very excited about that because people complained about not having new maps. And then lastly, he responds, we do plan to return the old operations. We've been working on our AI, working and reworking. should be over soon, and hopefully old ops will return somewhere in 2022. This is actually pretty cool to hear. I have never heard a commitment to say that they're looking to get operations back up and going. The only time I've heard was that they're not used very often. Because they're not used very often, why would you put developer time there? Why would you spend a developer's time developing something for 5% of the player base when you could have somebody developing something for 100% of the player base? Which makes sense, but I do think that there are players that are PvE only, and that having those is actually pretty important for them. And also, they're an excellent training tool if you don't want to just dive into co-op, which is basic, or randoms, which can be hellish. Anyway, continuing. Bandy continues. For example, why don't we have a Jutland weekend, a battleship-only battle mode, or tin can weekend, a destroyer battle mode on a regular basis? Map exists, ships exist, no fuss, no muss, just a slight adjustment of the matchmakers needed, players happy, why not? You do know that happy players will be inclined to spend more on the game, right? I'm asking this because, to be frank, none of the last 2 years or so decisions make any sense whatsoever. From that point of view, I mean, fun. It's not that much of a hidden concept, I hope. Octavian responds, we do know that. I'm sorry that our decisions have put you and some other players, including WoW's veterans, off. We will try to change that. More news, commitments, and changes will follow. We're still not decided if we should share the whole current course of action, including further plans that are more subject to change and delays, or should announce things as they come. In any case, please expect to hear from us more. So this is an interesting statement. That's actually a very interesting statement to me, because for many years now, 10, 15 something years, games as service, I think is how it's kind of referred to in the industry, which is basically software as a service. Is you put out software and you update it and you continually sell the software. So you subscribe to have a subscription to it. Games as a service, same thing. You're constantly interacting with the game and it's updating at the same time because it's a service. It's not just a one and done thing. You buy it and you've finished. There was a problem with game as a service where people would announce, plans which are further out. Because if you don't meet those plans, you may have an unforgiving player base that does not care. You said you'd do it. You should do it. Why the fuck isn't it here? See West Virginia 44. They never gave a timeline. They said soon. Most people would assume soon means less than 3 years, but they didn't give a timeline. They said soon. And it gets funky, and you get people that get really angry about it. It might not be the majority of the player base, and some people might not have experienced it or even care, but it's still a thing. And it can lead to some very, very angry responses if you give like a roadmap and you don't follow, or you can't meet the roadmap as announced. Some people can be forgiving, but there are people that will never ever be forgiving in any sense, in any possibility. So that's a question. There's some risk and reward to that. But they do say, in any case, expect to hear from us more. And I mean, not only are we hearing for Octavian, but we heard from Ev1n, and it feels like that's probably going to continue. I don't think there's more. There's a few responses here, but I don't think there's any more from Octavian. So I'm going to leave it at that. Again, the reason I did this, I guess I editorialized a little, but the reason I did this is because in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month, this post might end up getting buried. People don't remember where the hell these posts were. They get lost in the annals of time. And with all the stuff that's going on right now, this is information. It's useful information. So I figured, fuck it, I'll record it. I'll stick it on my YouTube. And the folks that are kind of watching it or paying attention through updates like this will be updated. And if I ever need to go back and reference something, well, I can, because I made a video, so I can just go back and find the video. So yeah, this has been Ensconce. Have a good one.